A lot of people watched the funeral for former President Carter today, and I thought it was one of the most substantive farewells for a president that I've seen. More importantly, I think that's the reason because Carter has always been underappreciated. And because he has been underappreciated, only the great things that he did outside of the presidency are the things that people looked at. Now, personally, I was too young during the Carter presidency to really understand what he did in depth. But I remember, I started really getting deeply into politics, starting with Reagan. Even then, as a neophyte, but learning a whole lot about the presidencies up and until Obama and beyond, it really taught a lot. In fact, as I did a lot of my studying with Obama and Bush 1, Bush 2, etc., because do remember, Bush 1 is the one who invaded Panama, the country of my birth. I learned a lot about Carter during those times, right? Because after all, Carter is the one who signed the Panama Canal Treaty that gave the canal back to Panama. I lived less than a mile from the canal, right? I am a product of the canal, right? My ancestors, the Panamanians of Caribbean descent, built the canal. So I understand it and understand the greatness of him coming to Panama and getting that and doing the right thing. But a lot of folks don't understand that there was so much more that he did. And at last, at his memorial, we had somebody that said it is time to dispel the myth that he was more accomplished outside of the presidency than he was within the presidency. When he was within the presidency, the magnitude of the things that this guy did was that of an impactful president. I want you to listen to what his deputy, his former White House domestic affairs advisor had to say, Stuart Eizenstat, because I hadn't seen anybody just sit back and enumerate in a short span of time all that President Carter had actually accomplished. Listen here, and then we'll take it on the other side.
As we lay our 39th president to rest, it's time to redeem his presidency and also lay to rest the myth that his greatest achievements came only as a former president. The test of American presidents is not the number of years they serve, but the duration of their accomplishments. By this measure, Jimmy Carter was among the most consequential one-term presidents in American history. His intellect, prodigious work habits, discipline, and mastery of details were crucial to his success at home and abroad. President Carter parked politics at the Oval Office door to do what he believed was the right thing, taking controversial challenges on, regardless of the political consequences, and frankly, there were many. Much of his agenda passed with bipartisan support, a quaint notion in today's hyper-polarized politics. Independent surveys indicated he had one of the highest success rates in passing his major legislation of any American president. And he was remarkably accessible to the press and to the American people. This president from the deepest part of the Deep South championed civil rights, appointing more people of color and women to senior executive positions and judgeships than all previous 38 presidents before him. He created the Department of Education and dramatically increased funding for low and moderate income students. And we can thank him for all the ethics in government laws, comprehensive civil service reform, the creation of FEMA to coordinate natural disaster relief and rebuilding that remain crucially important today, and we see it in Los Angeles. Jimmy Carter was also the greatest environmental president since Theodore Roosevelt, adding 80 million acres in Alaska to the national park system, and his Global 2000 report forecast climate change. His energy bills were critical to move our country from dependence on foreign oil to energy security. We are now, as a result, the largest oil and gas producer in the world. He provided the first incentives for conservation and inaugurated the era of clean energy, and symbolized it with solar panels he installed on the White House roof. Underappreciated at the time, but now widely recognized by Republicans and Democrats alike, President Carter was the great deregulator, winning legislative battles to loosen the regulatory bonds and shackles on airlines, thereby democratizing air travel, on trucking and rails, therefore helping our supply chains be more efficient, telecommunications leading to the cable TV era, and even the beer industry, which encouraged local craft beers. And he did so without compromising health and safety. These laid the foundations for today's innovative economy. Nothing better embodies President Carter than how he dealt with the inflation that beleaguered the nation under three presidents, two Republican, Nixon and Ford, and himself, during the 1970s. Over the objection of all of his advisors, he chose Paul Volcker to lead the Federal Reserve, knowing in advance that Volcker's tough monetary policy would raise interest rates and unemployment because Paul told him that, and would do so in a presidential election year. You take care of the economy, Paul. I'll take care of the politics. Inflation indeed dropped like a rock after he left office and remained low for decades. Abroad, Jimmy Carter laid the building blocks for a better world. He was the first president to make human rights a priority for U.S. foreign policy. And this led directly to the release of thousands of political prisoners in Latin America and stimulated them to a lasting democratic transition. He ushered in a new era of hemispheric relations with the Panama Canal treaties, the toughest legislative battle of his presidency. He uniquely combined the soft power of human rights, championing freedom for the communist East Bloc countries and tripling the emigration of Soviet Jews. He combined that with hard power, rebuilding America's military strength after its post-Watergate decline. He negotiated a major nuclear arms treaty with the Soviets, while at the same time initiated every single weapons system that came online in the 1980s. Those new weapons helped end the Cold War. He normalized relations with China, and even his critics applauded his tough measures after the Soviets invaded Afghanistan. Jimmy Carter's most lasting achievement, and the one I think he was most proud of, was to bring the first peace to the Middle East through the greatest act of personal diplomacy in American history, the Camp David Accords. For 13 days and nights, he negotiated with Israel's Menachem Begin and Egypt's Anwar Sadat, personally drafting more than 20 peace proposals and shuttling them between the Israeli and Egyptian delegations. And he saved the agreement at the 11th hour, and it was the 11th hour, by appealing to Begin's love of his grandchildren. For the past 45 years, the Egypt-Israel has never been violated and laid the foundation for the Abraham Accord. On the other side of the ledger was Iran. Jimmy Carter did not lose Iran, the Shah did. But the hostage crisis was a major factor in denying him a second term, despite his support for the Shah, because he placed the safe return of the hostages above his own political fortunes. He took full responsibility for the failure of the hostage rescue mission and worked tirelessly even after his bitter re-election defeat to Ronald Reagan, securing their release on the last day of his presidency. In the end, Jimmy Carter taught all of us how to live a life fulfilled with faith and service. He said, "I have one life to live. I feel like God wants me to do the best I can do with it, to let me live my life so that it will be meaningful." Well, Mr. President, you've more than achieved that goal. He may not be a candidate for Mount Rushmore, but he belongs in the foothills of making the U.S. stronger and the world safer. Jimmy Carter has earned his place in heaven, but just as he was free with sometimes unsolicited advice for his presidential successors, the Lord of all creation should be ready for Jimmy's recommendations on how to make God's realm a more peaceful place.
So yes, the guy was stubborn, though, that he was. But people who know what they want to do and know what they're doing is the right thing, the moral thing. You have a tendency to be, to be sort of anal, right? So I thought it was apropos the joke that Eizenstat made at the end with, "Hey God, Carter's going to kind of give you a little bit of trouble now." So I mean, but look, it was just great to see that those who listened got a chance to see that this was actually an impactful president, a president we should be proud of, and a president that many others should try to emulate in their post-presidency. That so far, none of them has. None of them so far. But maybe this kind of a send-off will encourage at least one of them to do the right thing.
We spend a lot of time deconstructing the news, trying to parse it into a form that everybody can understand. We try to find those little nitpicks where it flies above the fray, etc. If you really like these videos that we do, I want to ask a big favor. Please go ahead. Number one, subscribe to our channel. And number two, please join if you can. Thank you so kindly for watching. Keep watching. Please remember to share. We must populate the entire internet with our progressive message, a message that we know is what most Americans say that they want. So help us, please join.